He never raises his voice. He never begs for a seat at the table. He barely reacts to anything at all. And somehow, by the end of nearly every confrontation, the outcome has already bent in his direction, without anyone being able to point to the exact moment it happened. That's not luck. That's not plot armor. It's a working system, built from real psychological mechanisms that exist far outside fiction. Today, we're taking that system apart, piece by piece, to understand exactly why it works, and what it actually costs the person running it. Most people run their decisions through an invisible filter built from social approval, emotional comfort, and ego protection. They choose the option that feels safest to their identity, not necessarily the one that's actually optimal. This filter runs constantly, mostly unnoticed, quietly distorting almost every choice a person makes under pressure. The mindset built around Ayanokoji strips that filter out entirely. Every interaction, every conflict. What does this person, this situation, this decision actually produce? Emotion, in this framework, isn't treated as meaningless. It's treated as an error code, a signal that something needs debugging before a rational output can be trusted. This isn't the same profile clinical psychology assigns to psychopathy, and the distinction matters. Genuine psychopathy involves a biological absence of empathic capacity. The wiring for it simply isn't there. What this archetype represents instead is systemic conditioning, an environment so relentlessly engineered around performance and detachment that empathy gets suppressed by design, not by biological deficit. The capacity was likely always present. It was trained out through repetition, consequence, and total environmental control. The practical result is identical either way. A person who cannot be emotionally cornered because there was never an emotional lever installed for anyone to pull in the first place. Strip this down further and a clean operating principle emerges. Expect nothing emotionally from anyone, and nobody can hold anything emotional over you. Blackmail requires something to lose. Manipulation requires a want that can be exploited. Cornering someone requires an emotional exit they're desperate to protect. Remove the desperation, and every one of those tactics simply fails to find purchase. Not because the tactics are weak, but because the target they're built to exploit was never present to begin with. This is why characters and people operating on pure utilitarian evaluation are so difficult to out-maneuver using conventional social pressure. Conventional pressure assumes a predictable entire toolkit built to exploit it becomes obsolete on contact. Control in this framework is never applied through force. It's applied through information, specifically through the deliberate management of who has it and who doesn't. The first mechanism is total informational concealment. No baseline data gets revealed. Not true intelligence, not physical capability, not actual intention. This isn't shyness or modesty. It's a deliberate strategic posture, and it mirrors principles used in real crisis negotiation frameworks employed by agencies like the FBI. The less predictable and legible you are to the other party, the more that party is forced to fill the gap with projection. An opponent facing an unreadable actor doesn't simply wait for information. They generate their own, built from their own insecurities, their own assumptions, their own fears about what they might be facing. And because that projected information is built from their psychology rather than yours, it's almost always wrong in ways that benefit whoever stayed hidden. While they're busy revealing their actual strategy in an attempt to probe yours, you've given away nothing at all. The second mechanism doesn't require any action at all. Just patience and an accurate read of human predictability. Most people, under pressure, are driven by a small, repeatable set of forces: pride, fear, greed, insecurity. Once you understand which force is driving a specific opponent, You don't need to defeat them directly. You simply need to construct conditions where that force does the defeating on your behalf. This is the mechanism behind situations where an apparently passive actor watches a confrontation unfold and does nothing. Because doing nothing is the entire strategy. An opponent driven by wounded pride will overreact. An opponent driven by fear will overcorrect. An opponent driven by greed will overextend. The passive actor isn't absent from the outcome. They engineered the conditions and then simply let human nature complete the job. The third mechanism is the most counterintuitive. Real power, in this framework, deliberately avoids visibility, rather than leading from the front, where every move draws scrutiny, rivalry. A public figurehead takes the visible position, the credit, and the target on their back, while the actual strategic direction is set from a position nobody's watching closely enough to challenge. This isn't cowardice. It's risk allocation. Every visible position invites resistance proportional to its visibility. Remove yourself from visibility while retaining control of outcomes, and you retain the power without absorbing the cost that power typically demands. Underneath the strategic theory sits a set of concrete, repeatable behaviors, none of which require fictional circumstances to apply. A controlled facial expression and an unhurried pace of speech strip an opponent of the single most valuable resource they're fishing for: feedback. Most provocation exists specifically to generate a visible reaction, because that reaction tells the provocateur exactly how close they've come to a real vulnerability. Offer a neutral, unreadable exterior instead, and the provocation returns no data. The attempt simply dissolves unrewarded, and provocateurs rarely continue investing effort into a strategy that keeps producing nothing. Most people cannot tolerate an unfilled pause. The discomfort of silence pushes them to keep talking, over-explaining, over-justifying, occasionally revealing exactly the information they intended to protect. A deliberate refusal to fill that silence isn't passivity. It's an extraction technique, and one of the most reliable ones available in any high-stakes exchange, because it exploits a near-universal human discomfort rather than any specific individual weakness. The final behavioral principle treats attention and effort as a genuinely finite resource, not an infinite one to be spent reflexively on whatever demands it loudest. Engagement gets reserved specifically for situations that materially affect long-term objectives. Everything else, the noise, the minor slights, the low-stakes drama constantly competing for a reaction, gets met with be a structurally poor use of a limited resource. None of this popularity is accidental. Across YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit fan communities, hyper-rational, emotionally detached archetypes have exploded specifically because of who's watching them. A generation navigating relentless academic pressure, unstable career prospects, and constant digital exposure to comparison and judgment is drawn to a very specific fantasy: complete invulnerability to external chaos. A person who cannot be manipulated because there's no lever to pull. A person who cannot be humiliated because they never needed the room's approval. A person who cannot be burned out by outrage cycles because they were never plugged into them emotionally in the first place. This fantasy functions as an antidote to something very real: a widespread, culturally documented sense of being perpetually exposed, perpetually judged, and perpetually manipulable by systems designed to extract exactly those reactions. The appeal isn't really about the character at all. It's about what the character represents: a version of existence where none of that machinery has any purchase. Here's where the analysis has to turn, because stopping at "this mindset is powerful" tells only half the story, and it's the more comfortable half. Absolute control, pursued as a permanent way of living rather than a deployable tool, requires absolute isolation as its structural cost. The entire mechanism depends on treating every relationship as a variable to be assessed for utility, rather than a bond to be genuinely inhabited. That framework is devastatingly effective at preventing manipulation. It is equally effective at preventing connection, because the same wall that keeps exploitation out keeps intimacy out with it. There's no selective version of that wall that only blocks the people trying to hurt you. This is the actual paradox sitting underneath the fantasy. The power looks complete from the outside, untouchable, calculated, bulletproof to every form of social or emotional pressure. From the inside, sustained indefinitely, it functions as a fortress with exactly one occupant. Every person kept out to preserve the strategic advantage is also a person who never gets close enough to actually know the one living inside it. Fiction rarely lingers on this cost because the cost doesn't photograph well. Total control makes for a compelling highlight reel. It rarely makes for a life anyone would choose to actually live inside for decades, once the audience isn't watching anymore. The distinction that separates a genuinely useful version of this mindset from a self-destructive one comes down to a single question. Is the detachment switched on deliberately for specific high-stakes moments, or is it running permanently, indiscriminately, against everyone regardless of context? Moments where emotional exposure would create real strategic risk. Every mechanism described here functions exactly as advertised. Concealment, patience, neutral presentation, controlled engagement. All genuinely effective, all genuinely learnable, all genuinely worth building. Deployed permanently against everyone, in every context, including the people who were never actually a threat. The same mechanism stops being a strategic tool and starts being the architecture of a life with nobody actually inside it. The wall doesn't know the difference between an opponent and a friend. It blocks both with identical efficiency, unless a conscious decision gets made to lower it selectively, on purpose, for people who've actually earned that exception. The mindset works. That much is not in dispute. The mechanisms behind it are real, documented, and used deliberately by people operating in genuinely high-stakes environments where composure and concealment carry real strategic value. But a tool used at all times stops being a tool. It becomes the only shape a person knows how to take, and the fortress built to keep out every threat eventually keeps out everyone else along with it. Learn the mechanics. Use the silence, the concealment, the patience, exactly where the stakes call for it. Just remember to leave a door somewhere in that fortress. Because the version of this mindset worth actually building was never the one that isolates you completely. It was always the one sharp enough to protect you, and secure enough to still let someone in.